Hi guys, today we're going to test a bunch of myths in Palworld. From things like whether or not it's possible to beat the endgame bosses with only a Cattiva, all the way through to capturing uncapturable NPCs, and even seeing if it's possible to rewind time to see if you can prevent yourself from dying. All that and more is coming up, so drop a like if you're excited and we'll get started. Oh, and if you've got any myths you want tested in future episodes, leave a comment and I'll shout you out if I choose your myth. First myth. We've all spent hours buying and selling stuff with NPCs in different settlements around the world. But what happens when those NPCs go home at the end of their day? Like when they clock out, are they gossiping around the corner? Are they going home to their family? Like, is there drama amongst the villagers? To dig into this, I did some investigative journalism, right guys? So I teleported to the small settlement and I noticed that this researcher was running towards the woods with their gun out, which seems a bit mysterious, right? That's a bit suspicious. I followed them all the way into the woods, only to see them shoot and kill a gossiping villager, which on its own might seem like enough craziness for one day, but this researcher was not done committing crimes, apparently. So the researcher turned around, returned to town after their cold-blooded murder, and I then found them standing next to a corpse in the village, which was another shock. It turns out, though, the corpse was none other than the village chief. We have just seen a coup, a revolt, a revolution in Palworld happen right before our eyes. So I reckon what happened is the gossiping villager must have assassinated the chief in a ploy to overthrow the small village, only to try and escape by running to the hills and being chased down by the researcher who hunted them for sport. Apparently, villagers have whole lives that we would never otherwise know about inside Palworld that happen behind the scenes. Pretty dramatic. Okay, next myth. Can we glide further with a Galeclaw if we redeploy every couple of seconds? To test this out, I am going to head to the Syndicate Tower by the volcano, and once we get up there, we've got to find some kind of reference so that we can kind of measure our speed. So I am going to choose a nearby statue, as you can see here, and to make it as clear as possible which of the methods, redeploying or not redeploying, is best here, we're going to do a little side-by-side action, okay? So we're going to sync these up. We're going to run off the top of the tower together. And as you can see, as I fly here, without redeploying the glider every few seconds, my trajectory ends up going downwards much quicker, while the redeploy trick keeps me going pretty horizontal, actually. So redeploying the glider until I run out of stamina, at least, is the clear winner here. And I would recommend doing this anytime you can for that extra height in your jumps. Okay, next myth. You should already know by now that there's a disassembly mode. So when you've got buildables and you disassemble them, it will give you your materials back, right? But the question is, if you're feeling like a bit of a silly sausage one day and you just decide to break your own buildables with your own tools, will the game still refund you? Or does it punish you for being a silly sausage and give you back nothing at all? Let's test this out now. This is a pretty easy one. We're gonna break this down here, and I didn't get any materials back. So the moral of the story here is don't be a silly sausage and use the disassembly mode. For our next myth, cannibalism. That's what we're investigating today. Is it true some pals are cannibals in the wild? They eat their own kind. So the first thing we got to do is find a couple torchies in the wild. And if you look a little closer, you can see this one's eating its friend after the friend blew itself up. So not only did that friend have a cursed life, it then had its corpse desecrated in the afterlife by another Tochi. Like, that's just disrespectful at that point. But I am impressed with how big its appetite must be. Like, that's crazy. Okay, for our next myth, all of us have gone through the game's tutorial, and we've gotten to Zoe and Grizzbolt, and I guarantee none of us have ever had an original thought in our lives, because I know you had your little blue pal sphere in your hand, and you were like, I want to capture both of them. And then you've noticed that you have a 0% capture chance on them, and your dreams have been crushed. But the question is, can we find a way to capture Zoe and Grizzbolt with a blue pal sphere after all? In order to test this out, I've heard a theory that requires us to bring the police into the Syndicate Tower. So we're going to bring them inside and we're going to let them fight Zoe and Grizzbolt for us. And if this myth is true, what should happen here is as long as we're successful in getting the police to fight Grizzbolt, Grizzbolt, then at some point we should see Grizzbolt walk away. Here we go. Grizzbolt is leaving. Grizzbolt the pacifist. God bless you, Grizzbolt. So both Zoe and Grizzbolt have had enough, right? And for some reason, this makes them capturable. So this is kind of weird, but myth confirmed. You can indeed capture them that way. And some of you might be wondering, okay, let's take this upper level. What happens if you make Zoe and Grizzbolt fight Zoe and Grizzbolt? So I'm going to chuck my captured Zoe and Grizzbolt down here. And I mean, yeah, they can fight each other. So here you go, Grizzbolt. Here's a little pat on the head for murdering your twin. Before we get on to the next myth, I've got a quick word from today's sponsor, Enlisted. Enlisted is a squad-based PvP and PvE FPS game available for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. In it, you can take control of a squad of AI-controlled soldiers and lead them into some of the most pivotal battles of World War II. You can play as the US, Germany, Soviet Union, Japan, and unlock hundreds of weapons, tanks, and aircraft to customize your squads with. There are also lots of different roles and abilities you can use too, and I'm especially a fan of how grounded the game is, really feeling like an authentic big team World War II shooter. Now, for those of you that have played it before, the game's received a massive metagame update recently, adding research trees for weapons and vehicles, a matchmaker, and loads of other gameplay improvements, all developed in collaboration with the Enlisted community. So, click the link in the description to jump back in now, or if you're a new player on PC, that same link will give you a bunch of in-game items, 4,000 silver, 3 days of account premium, and a whole barrel of fun, but it's only available for a limited time, so click through now. So, on a slightly less morbid note, previously in the game, up until now, we've all had to deal with this bug where Liffmunk Effigy upgrades actually decreased your capture rate, like they didn't give you the proper increase. That has now been fixed. So the myth kind of is, do Liffmunk Effigy upgrades actually work now? And the answer is yes, they do, as you can see. So this is great news. Okay, next, super simple myth. Can you take less fall damage if you slide to ease your fall? And if you're wondering, well, why the hell would that possibly work? Allow me, parkour expert, MrRoflWaffles, to explain.
I could do some parkour here.
It's a bit dark though.
It might make me look like Batman.
Maybe.
You see, in real life, when you're a parkour champion like myself, you need to slow down your impact with the ground or slow down your impact against a wall or whatever in order to lessen the damage that you take from it, like breaking your ankles or something.
I was expecting follow cam.
Oh, you
What kind of parkour is this?
And so by sliding or doing a little roll or something like that, you slow down your impact, and it means that there is less force transferred into your body all at once, so you take less damage. And because we all know that Palworld is an exact clone of real life, this is definitely going to also apply there too, right? So to test this in game, we're just going to see if I can avoid taking full damage here by doing a little slideroonie on this incline, okay? Making my impact just a little bit less harsh. But it was still pretty harsh fall damage that I took there, so I think this myth is unfortunately busted. Now for another parkour myth, I've heard people speculate that climbing without jumping is actually more efficient, and the simple way to find out is to test it. So I'm going to start out here by jumping onto this wall and then just keeping climbing without doing any jumping, all right? And if I speed this up a little bit for you and time it, I go for about 33 seconds before I have to bail onto the little ledge here. So keep that number in mind, 33 seconds. Now let's climb up the same wall, but instead of only jumping right at the beginning, we are going to jump every second we can. Any opportunity the game gives me to jump here, I'm going to do it. And once I speed this up and get to the end of it, it turns out our final results are 33 seconds of climbing when we're not jumping and 26 seconds of climbing when we are jumping. That's when we run out of stamina. And you also climb higher if you're jumping compared to if you're not jumping. So jumping is the way to go. Do not be stingy with your jumps, people. And speaking of laziness, we've all had a day in our life, right, where we've woken up and we've been like, nah, you hit the alarm clock, you go back to bed till midday. But is that possible in Palworld? Like, can you sleep during the day? That's our myth. First of all, if you go and you try and sleep during the day, you're going to have this happen, right? Your player is just going to lie in the bed, and that's not sleeping. That's lying down, right? There is a difference. However, if we wait until the first second that the sun begins to set, and then we go back inside, boom, there we go. As we can see, we are now sleeping. So this one's not really confirmed. It's not during the day fully, but if you look in the corner, it is during the day part of the day-night cycle still. So I guess, yeah, kind of counts. Now this one's really we're just pushing the game's physics engine to the max here. So you might have gotten yourself into a situation, if you're an idiot like me, where you are falling to your death, but it is such a great fall that you have time to think about your life decisions while you do it. And the question, okay, the myth that we want to explore is, while falling to your death in such a situation, could you avoid dying by just leaving the game? So once I load back in here, as you can see, it's actually going to put me right back at the edge of the ledge. But you might have noticed returning to the title screen takes a couple seconds for the game to kind of catch up and to kick me out of the game. So now let's test it where I click leave, but then I see my character die as I exit. I'm really just hurling myself to certain death in the name of science here. Logging back in though, it turns out it's put us right back at the edge of the ledge once again. So you can survive this way. Myth confirmed. For our next myth, we are investigating eggs today. If you get a large rocky egg in your game, you'll know that they like warmth when they're incubating. So you start with no heat source and they're cold, but then if you place a fire down, the egg will be just a little cold. Now, on top of that fire, if you then build a heater, you'll notice that the egg stays on just a little cold. So I wondered, is it possible to heat up eggs using multiple heat sources? Like if it doesn't work with different heat sources, like one fire and one heater, can we just do it with 20 fires? So I'm going to place 20 fires right now, and we're going to find out. Sadly, it seems like our environment is actually the biggest factor here. So just because we have 20 fires doesn't mean that they all collectively combine together to heat up the egg. Like maybe I just need better insulation in my air or something. Or I could just do what the game wants me to do, which is to go to the volcano. So sadly, this myth is busted. Now then, parkour expert Milo reporting in on a new parkour myth. Can you avoid fall damage by clinging onto a wall? Easy one to test this. We're going to head over to these ancient towers and jump off. And as we fall, we're going to try very desperately to cling onto the wall. And it turns out you can actually do it. You can just grab onto the wall and you'll have no fall damage. It's amazing. Myth confirmed. Now, if only it were like that in real life, eh? Our next myth is inspired by GTA 6. Drop me a comment down below if you're excited for that game. We all know in GTA that you got to hide from the cops in order to get your wanted level to go down. But it's a pain in the butt because those cops can see you everywhere, dude. They are very sneaky. But the question is, can we do the same sort of thing in Palworld? Can you lose your wanted status by just going into a dungeon and kind of cheesing it? So to test this out, I'm gonna take a cheap shot at this guard. Okay, I'm gonna get myself wanted. And then let's head to this dungeon nice and nearby. I noticed pretty damn quickly that they actually followed me inside. But I then wondered, what happens if I kill all the angry guards while I'm in the dungeon? Like, what's that gonna do? So of course, I took them out as peacefully as I could. I didn't want to be disrespectful here, so I went about this the pacifist way and slaughtered them all. And once my little conquest of peace was complete, I actually kept my wanted status. So this myth is busted. You cannot lose your wanted status by going into a dungeon. Now, some of you may wonder, how long can you actually stay wanted for? Like maybe that's your thing. Maybe you want people to want you. Would certainly make a change from real life, wouldn't it? So let's test it in game. Sorry. These PIDF elites don't leave you alone, even if you teleport. So I decided to just keep on taking them out, right? I figured, hey, that'll be a good way to test this. And I managed to get all the way to a wanted level of 85 before dying. And so I reckon if you were even more of a serial killer than I am, you could go even further, which is crazy. You could be wanted forever. Now, for another flying myth, I've heard people speculate that you might be able to glide faster if you glide with a higher level Galeclaw. So here's me with my level 50 Galeclaw, and we'll do a little bit of a speed check here, a little speed test. It's obviously pretty fast, but is it faster than a level 20 Galeclaw, for example? So if we swap over to the level 20, you'll see that actually the answer is no. They're the same speed. So myth busted. But for a bonus here, any attribute in the game that speeds your pals up doesn't impact how fast Galeclaw guides. So don't go thinking that you can max out those attributes and that way you're going to be able to get faster gliding. You actually can't. The only other way to gain speed during one of those glides is sliding down an incline before gliding and maximizing your momentum, I think. But leave a comment if you've got any other ways. Next up, the myth we've all been waiting for. This isn't just a mystery, right? This isn't a piece of information in your brain. This is a story of hope and sacrifice and of Cattiva. But not just any Cattiva, the chosen Cattiva. Cattiva, okay? So Cattiva, it probably have the biggest personality of all pals in Palworld. Their main attack, Punch Flurry, is way better than the 40 damage it says it does because it does it multiple times and it does it rapidly, and you see them everywhere and they're cute, right? So I thought, how can I exploit it? So I went out and captured over 100 Cattivas, okay? And all because I wanted to find good ones for breeding specifically, okay? Eventually, I had 2 decent parents and I was like, you guys are gonna do me a solid and you're gonna give birth to God real quick. So started breeding them, and at first I wasn't satisfied. I was like, these just look like more Cattiva. But after hours and hours of work, I successfully bred a pretty mediocre Cattiva, but it was the best I could get. So I just thought to myself, you know, maybe it's just a prophecy that through hard work and tenacity, this mediocre Cattiva can become the hero of legend. Like, you don't need to be born perfect to succeed. Wouldn't that be a wonderful moral of the story, right? And so what did I do with my hero of ages? Well, quite simple. I sacrificed 100 other Cattiva and infused their souls into my Cattiva to empower it. I then went to the Statue of Power. I raised its attack. I raised its max health. I raised its defense, and I started quaking in fear at just how powerful my little Cattiva had become. But still, even with all this hard work, right, creating a religion's apparently pretty tricky. I had to create some myths for the people to start believing in, right? For the villagers to be amazed by, some miracles out in the world. So I decided to take my Cattiva through a series of trials, right? The first thing it had to do was fend off these 3 chillets, and it did it with ease. The Cattiva didn't even blink. It had a great time. So then I was like, okay, how about a Relaxaurus Lux? Like, will it be able to stand up against one of those? And to my real surprise, and this worked out perfectly for my little myths and legends I was creating here, it flung the Relaxaurus all the way up the dungeon's ceiling before finishing it off. Like, it was putting on a show. It is a goddamn savage out there in the ring. This thing's crazy. So I was like, surely there's a limit to the power of this little child. So I took it one step further, and I took it to the desert in a showdown to face an Anubis. This was its hardest trial thus far, and it did need some help, admittedly. I had to capture it a couple times, redeploy it, help it get its health back, avoid taking too much damage from those attacks. But still, just because it's the chosen one doesn't mean this isn't a team effort, baby. And so through that team effort, it prevailed. But despite all this success, some further trials humbled our little Cattiva. So anything that wasn't on the ground was a real struggle for it. The Cattiva got absolutely smacked by this Astegon, for example, probably to nobody's surprise. But still, the hero has to learn a lesson at some point in their story, right? And this was Cattiva's lesson, which it would take on to bigger and better battles in its future. Axel and Orzurk. Now, I'll be the first to admit that my Cattiva, right, which I previously said was a mediocre breed, it struggled a bit here. It didn't have the easiest time in the world. And so you know what I thought it needed? More damage. But that also meant that it would take more damage too. And so with the stakes raised, my Cattiva fought bravely and nobly, and through that bloody conflict, my punch-happy Cattiva was somehow actually victorious over this final boss. So I guess that's kind of myth confirmed. It can be endgame bosses, but there are also a lot of other endgame bosses in the game. So if you'd like to see the Trials of Cattiva continue, then drop a like on the video. And on screen right now, I've got a bunch of my other Palworld videos linked. So that's it for the video. But before you go, make sure to check out today's sponsor, Enlisted. You can play it for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox using my link in the pinned comment or the video description. Like I said before, if you click that link and you're a new PC player, you'll get a bonus pack with a bunch of free in-game items such as the Enfield P14 rifle, and you'll also get 4,000 silver and 3 days of premium account. It's free, so you've got nothing to lose. Give it a click now.